Start once more. Okay, can you see the screen?
Yes, yes, we can.
Okay. Thank you very much. So, living through the Gita, session number 9, chapter number 8, and this is Yoga of Imperishable Brahman, Akshar Brahman Yoga, and attaining the supreme goal at the moment of death. So, I will go through the kind of themes which we are going to talk about in this chapter. First of all, the logic and the flow of thought so far. I think it's important for us to understand chapter by chapter, how Bhagwan Krishna is developing the theme and the flow of thought, which is step-by-step instruction and guidance to Arjuna and to us as well, in terms of what we need to think about as the self, as the divine, and the identity between ourselves and the divine. So the first thing is that the basis of Arjuna's question, which are based on the words used at the end of the last chapter. So if you remember that Arjuna asked, Lord Krishna mentioned several things at the end of the last chapter, and it was like he is introducing those terms for the first time. And this prompts Arjuna to ask the questions based on those categories which Bhagwan Sri Krishna introduces at the end of chapter number 7. So Bhagwan in fact answers the first 6 questions very briefly. From 8 in just 2 verses, he explains these 6 questions in a brief manner. And then he goes on to answer the 7th question in summary, first of all, and then takes the rest of the chapter, further elaboration on the technique, right up to the end of the chapter. He talks about what to do at the moment of death. So further elaboration on the technique, which is another 3 verses, and the yogic method of concentration, daily and at the moment of death. Now we'll see why we need to do this on a daily basis and why it will be present for us at the moment of death. And then Brahma. Brahma is, of course, different from Brahman. Brahmaji is the creator of the universe, and Bhagwan Sri Krishna puts us in this huge time scale of creation and dissolution in relation to Brahman. And I think it is important for us to understand even this kind of way in which this vision is created for us, so that we can put ourselves in context to this huge time scale and the great creation which is right in front of us. And then at the end, Lord Krishna talks about the 2 paths, the dark and the light, the path of return and the path of no return, and how to attain the supreme. So these are the themes which we are going to talk about. Okay, so let's first of all look at what we have covered so far. So session 1, again, to kind of remember that overview of the Bhagavad Gita, the setting of the teaching right in the middle of the battlefield. And session number 2, we talked about the first chapter and Arjuna's condition. And really speaking, as I mentioned before, is that Arjuna's condition is our condition, because Arjuna is a representative of humanity. And this person who is right in the middle of the battlefield, and he is caught up in a kind of mood or a state of mind, which is a state of crisis. And we also talked about the way in which Arjuna's distressed condition and Bhagwan's response is given, overview of the guidance in chapter number 2. So just an introduction to chapter number 2, which we talked about. And Bhagwan gives a detailed response, and we see the overall teaching of the Bhagavad Gita right in chapter number 2. So I'll also talk about that a bit as well. And basically he talks about Sankhya Yoga, Karma Yoga, and the person of perfection. These are the three main themes which are taken up by Lord Krishna, and then getting established in the knowledge as this person of perfection. So session number 4, chapter number 3 was a full description of Karma Yoga. And of course, many of these things are then echoed throughout the Bhagavad Gita. He keeps on referring back to earlier ideas which he has developed before. So it's very consistent in terms of what he's talking about, coherent in terms of making references to what he has already talked about. And Karma Yoga is about the nature of action, sacrifice, and the means of purification through Karma Yoga. Session number 5, chapter number 4, renunciation of action in knowledge. So renunciation in knowledge, renunciation taken as a kind of detachment from the action itself through the knowledge of the self. And again, we saw how this produces or introduces another step in this whole journey of a spiritual purpose. And here Lord Krishna reveals his own divine nature, the incarnation, and the purpose of this divine incarnation. He introduces again the Karma Yoga in relationship to Bhakti Yoga, which is in a sense Saguna Upasana, and Jnana Yoga, Nirguna Dhyana. So everything is now kind of put into place so that Karma Yoga, Bhakti Yoga, and Jnana Yoga are kind of seen as the major pathways through which we are going to follow our sadhana and then to reach the destination, which is moksha. Remember, moksha is the ultimate purpose of this journey. And Saguna Upasana means that we are looking at the divine with attributes. And Nirguna Dhyana means that we are absorbed in meditation on the nameless and the formless. So you can see how now it becomes more deeper and more detailed in terms of the pathway which we need to take. So going on further, chapter number 5, we talked about true renunciation. And here Bhagwan talks about Brahmanishta, the nature of Jnananishta, the Jnani, and the Atmavid. Again, I'll cover some of that as well. In chapter number 7, session number 7, this is the yoga of meditation, Dhyana Yoga. And this concludes the first 6 chapters as a description of the human condition and human nature. This is, remember that the Mahavakya, which is being used to categorize the 18 chapters, says that the first 6 chapters is Tao. The second 6 chapters are that, which is the divine. So the human, the divine, and the last 6 chapters talk about the identity between the divine and the individual. So Dhyana Yoga is the culmination of this first section. Karma Yogi, Sannyasi, Jnani, the technique of meditation, all these are described in detail by Bhagwan. And then in chapter number 7, we saw renunciation of action in knowledge, switching the channel to that. Sorry, this should be Jnana Vijnana Yoga. There is a kind of mistake there. So switching the channel to that or divine, and how to have full knowledge of the Supreme Brahman, both Jnana and Vijnana. And again, reminding ourselves that this is really the overall general structure of the process of the Bhagavad Gita: knowledge, practice, transformation. And this applies to everything in our life. And Bhagavad Gita is also kind of focused in terms of gaining the knowledge, jnana, then through practice, getting vijnana, which means experiential knowledge. And through that experiential knowledge, this inner transformation will begin. And if we translate in terms of the Bhagavad Gita and the pathway, selfless action, then knowledge of the self, and of course, Karma Yoga, and Jnana Yoga, and self-realization is the transformation which we are looking for, the ultimate transformation, which is seen to be self-realization or realization of our true nature. Karma Yoga, Jnana Yoga, and then Jnana Nishtha. So this is the kind of overall schematic of the Bhagavad Gita. And if we keep this in mind, then we understand the various different pieces of the puzzle as Bhagwan Krishna puts them one by one into place. So Karma Yoga, of course, implies Bhakti Yoga as well, then the Jnana Yoga, and then becoming established in the knowledge. This is called Jnana Nishtha. Okay, so this is the spiritual journey. And we saw that in the earlier chapters. Karmi, the one who is not on the spiritual path yet, he is functioning according to his ego identity. He is a karta and a bhokta. He is doing the actions and enjoying the fruits of the action. Then he goes on the spiritual path. And the first thing he has to learn to do is to become a karma yogi. What is that? Karta and abhokta. So maybe there is still the doership is there, but abhokta means that he is giving up this sense of enjoyership. How is that going to be done? By Ishvar Arpan Buddhi and Prasad Buddhi. In other words, detaching from the fruit of the action, at the same time offering everything to God. So this is also where Bhakti Yoga comes in. And then the next step is Karma Sannyasi, or something which is bypassing this Karma Yoga to the Jnana Yoga. But we can see it as a sequence in terms of Karma Sannyasi, who is now a Karta and a Bhokta to a certain extent. He is not completely disidentified with the doership and the enjoyership, but there is a large amount of that. So he can bypass some of these practices which are required by somebody who has just stepped onto the path, and he can go straight into Jnana Yoga. So then Jnana Yogi is what develops out of the Karma Sannyasi, and this is Akarta, Abhokta even more, and then Atmavit. This is completely established in the non-doership and the non-enjoyership. In other words, the individual identity has now completely disappeared. And here, this is where now the person becomes established in the knowledge. Jnana Nishtha, this is the person of perfection, and this is where the journey kind of comes to a conclusion. Okay, this is the journey. So steady renunciation of the fruit of the action and action itself. This is what is happening throughout this journey. Disidentification from the enjoyership and the doership. So I become less and less of this doer of the actions, and I become less and less of the enjoyer of the fruits of the action as well. This is what is happening, and this is the spiritual journey which Bhagwan Shri Krishna lays down for us with very detailed guidance in each one of these stages. And here from Jnana Yogi to Atmavit is a very intense practice of meditation. This is what we saw in chapter number 6. So again, we can see that various different techniques and methods and sadhana are given for each one of these stages. And at this particular juncture of Jnana Yogi to Atmavit, there is this deep absorption through Dhyana Yoga. Okay, so the solution, we know the problem of the jiva, which is jiva vishada. So remember, the first chapter is known as Arjuna Vishada Yoga. And what does Vishada mean? It means these, we can think of this in three terms: shoka, moha, and bhaya. So shoka is grief, moha is delusion in the moment, and bhaya is something which is oriented towards the future. I'm anxious about various different things. This is going to happen, that is going to happen, and more lockdown is going to come. This is bhaya, anxiety. So Arjuna's condition involved all these three things. He was in a state of grief, shoka. He was also deluded about his present condition, so much so that he got confused. I don't know what to do. Lord Krishna, tell me precisely, exactly, clearly what I should be doing. And he is also in a state of fear, anxiety, that I'm caught up in this dilemma. Now you tell me what to do. So Bhagwan Shri Krishna gives him this solution, which is Jiva Sadhana. So Jiva Vishada and Jiva Sadhana are the problem and the solution. And what does it mean? Karma Yoga, it means Karma Sannyasa, it means Jnana Yoga, and it means Dhyana Yoga. And of course, I was saying that Karma Yoga implies Bhakti Yoga, but that is dealt with in much more detail in what we looked at in the last chapter. And also in this chapter, we'll see how he kind of guides us through understanding divine in a slightly different way, but also as a part of our continuing journey. So this is again the pathway: steady renunciation of the fruit of the action and action itself. Disidentification from enjoyership and doership, absorption in the self in meditation. Okay, again, looking at the overall kind of teaching of the Bhagavad Gita, Sankhya, which is the knowledge of the self, which is given to us in chapter number 2, 11 to 30, and then the practice, which is practice of Karma Yoga. And then the outcome of all this practice, sadhana, is that one becomes a person of perfection. And these characteristics of the person of perfection are given in the last section of the chapter number 2. This is called Sthita Pragna Lakshana, characteristics of the one who is established in knowledge. So again, it's kind of useful to remember some of these, overall kind of structures which are in place in the Bhagavad Gita, so that when we read individual verses, then we can put them in their right context, in the right place. Okay, so looking at, again, another point of view, this is Arjuna's distressed condition and Sankhya and Yoga. This is again the overview which is given to us in chapter number 2. So Bhagwan introduces Sankhya and Yoga, and he says that you can go straight into complete renunciation and into Jnana Nishtha. Now, this is a very rare case where someone goes straight into Jnana Nishtha, and Bhagwan Sri Ramana Maharshi is one example where at the age of 18, complete renunciation, so much so that when he left his home at the age of 18, he didn't even say, I am leaving. He says, this body is leaving. Can you see the degree of renunciation which is there? Complete disidentification with doership and enjoyership. But as I say, that is a rare case. So for most people, it is about Karma Yoga, first of all, renunciation of action in knowledge, and then Jnana Yoga, Dhyana Yoga, and Jnana Nishtha. So in other words, Sankhya and Yoga kind of go step by step, hand in hand, taking you through Karma Yoga, taking you through renunciation of action itself, and then deep absorption in the knowledge through meditation, and then it will lead you to Jnana Nishtha. Also, in a sense, that true renunciation, this is now karma sannyas. So we have taken one example of Bhagwan Ramana Maharshi, where at the age of 18, complete renunciation goes straight into Jnana Nishtha. There are people also, again, not a large number, but there are people who are taking up this path of sannyas even at an early age, because somehow they're not interested in the things of the world, although they're still functioning with a certain sense of identity and attachment. It is mostly they don't have this attachment and identification. So they take up sannyas right at the very beginning of their lives, and then it is easy for them to go into Jnana Yoga and then into Jnana Nishtha. So you can see Bhagwan has left nothing out. He says, if you are at this level, go straight to the end. If you're at this level, yes, you have to work a bit harder, and there are a few steps for you to follow. But if you're a kind of true renunciate, there you go. Go straight to Jnana Yoga and then go to Jnana Nishtha. Again, something for us to remember and bring to mind while we are reading the Bhagavad Gita. Okay, so remember that in chapter number 7, he said, I shall declare to you the knowledge and the realization. And putting it in context of this chapter, then I'm going to just talk briefly about Jnanam, which is Saguna, the Paroksha Jnanam, which is the knowledge, mediate. Mediate means that it is through an instrument, like the mind or the intellect. Brahman is the final reality pervading all names and forms. This is the intellectual knowledge I can get through contemplation and reflection on this knowledge. This is the Jnanam. And God is the object and I am the devotee who is the subject. So a sense of duality is still there. And then if we go to the other part of it, the Vijnanam, this is Nirguna Bhakti. So Nirguna Dhyanam, which is a Paroksha Jnanam, and this means realization, immediate experiential knowledge, and I am Brahman, and I am the knower who becomes Brahman. So this is the God and the devotee are one. There is no duality here. So Jnanam and Vijnanam, Paroksha Jnanam and Aparoksha Jnanam, immediate intellectual knowledge and experiential knowledge. These are the categories which Lord Krishna introduces in this chapter, and we will see how the Saguna Paroksha Jnanam becomes important in this chapter. Okay, so just keep that in mind. So again, the lower nature which Lord Krishna talked about in the last chapter, 5 elements, mind, intellect, egoity, inert, it is without consciousness, and it is called Saguna Tattvam with attributes, and there is continuous modification going on, Savikara Tattvam, and it is a dependent existence. It is manifest and it is immanent divine. In other words, that what I see in front of me as this world creation full of attributes, part of that I can start thinking about as the manifest divine. So I look at the world and creation and say, this is nothing but God. But there is a continuous modification which is going on. This is Savikara Tattvam. And the other aspect is the higher nature. Paraprakriti, pure consciousness, existence, principle. Now this is without attributes, Nirguna Tattvam, and without modification, Nirvikara Tattvam. And independent existence. It is not depending on anything. And everything else depends on it, but it is absolutely independent existence. This is Brahman. This is a pure consciousness, pure existence principle. So again, keeping this in mind, we will see how it relates to this present chapter. And again, unmanifest, transcendental divine. So you got the immanent divine, which is the Saguna Brahman, and we got the transcendental or unmanifest divine, which is the Nirguna Brahman. So Saguna Tattvam, Savikara Tattvam, Nirguna Tattvam, Nirvikara Tattvam relate to these two aspects of the divine. Manifest divine, unmanifest divine. Okay, so chapter number 8. Now, we know there's a jnani, which again, he gave us the category, Bhagwan Krishna gave us the categories of thinking about all different kinds of human beings, 7 categories of human beings, which he mentions, and the 3 lower ones, we can say these are the ajnanis who don't have any inclination towards spirituality. They just live their life with complete sense of doership, complete sense of enjoyership. They will go straight into repeated births, and the cycle of birth and death continues for them unless they start stepping onto the spiritual path. And the jnani. So the jnani, again, vijnana and jnana coming together as complete knowledge, he goes straight into the unmanifest Brahman, attains self-realization and gets liberated. Whereas now we have got the manifest Brahman, which is now becomes the object of our sadhana. So Nirguna Brahman, Nirguna Dhyanam leads to liberation because establishing in the truth, whereas here we are devoted to the manifest Brahman, which means with a name and a form. Now that becomes an upasana. So in this chapter, this is what is going to be relevant, okay? Upasana, and at the end of life, at the point of death, if enough sadhana has been done, enough upasana has been done, then Om comes to the mind at the point of death, and then what happens? Gradual liberation. Krama mukti, but it is a liberation. Okay, it goes again to liberation. Whereas if the Om is not there at the point of death, but Upasana has been carried out, there is another consequence, which is that elevated births are attained. You remember Arjuna asked this question, what happens if I don't manage to get Jivan Mukti in this life, but I have done sadhana, then what happens? So Lord Krishna says, you will get an elevated birth. So you will be born in a family who is a pious family, which is a pious family, and also with enough resources for you not to worry about anything else. You can have a head start in your life by going onto this pathway again. So liberation, gradual liberation, elevated births, and then coming back again and again to elevated more and more, getting more and more elevated until one becomes able to either go right to the unmanifest Brahman, or at the point of death, you have Om and you chant Om and you have this liberation, which is called Krama Mukti or gradual liberation. So remember this pathways to perfection, because this is what is the connection between the last chapter and this chapter. And what we are going to look at in this chapter is this area which is in the gray square, in the gray rectangle. Okay, so just to give you an overview of this chapter in terms of what it's going to talk about. Okay, so the next thing is the introduction to chapter number 8 in the last chapter. So this is where Bhagwan says, those who strive for liberation from old age and death, those who strive for liberation from old age and death. Remember, he's talking about old and death in a certain context. Taking refuge in me, they realize in full that Brahman, the whole knowledge of the self and all action. So even at the point of death, there is also this striving for liberation, but at the point of death, Jivan Mukti has not been attained, but if they are able to take refuge in Bhagwan at that last moment, they realize in full that Brahman, and what happens then? Complete liberation. So the whole knowledge of the self and all action is available to this realized person right at the point of death. So freedom from old age and death means what? Freedom from samsara and change. Taking refuge, my only goal and means in life, and realize both jnana and avijnana means manifest and unmanifest, action and actionlessness. Those who know me as the Adibhuta, pertaining to the world of objects, Adideva, pertaining to the gods and all sense organs, Adiyajna, pertaining to sacrifice or perceptions, even at the time of death, steadfast in mind, they will know me. So now this is at the end of chapter number 7, last chapter, where Bhagwan Shri Krishna introduces these terms. And he talks about these 3 terms, but of course, Arjuna is very intelligent as well. And he connects these 4 things which Lord Krishna is mentioning here to another context, and we'll see how he does that. So Arjuna asked the question based on these terms, which is the next chapter which we are looking at, the Yoga of Imperishable Brahman. So Arjuna is now asking the question. This is the beginning of the chapter. What is that Brahman? What is Adhyatma? What is action, or best amongst men? What is declared to be the Adibhuta? And what is Adideva said to be? Who and how is Adiyajna here in this body, or destroyer of Madhu? Madhu, you remember, was a demon. And how at the time of death are you to be known by the self-control? So can you see that Arjuna has taken the 4 things which Bhagwan talked about in the last chapter and framed it in a slightly different manner, so that he includes some of the terms which we are going to talk about. So he asked about 7 things. Okay, so Arjuna is asking about Brahman, and the Blessed Lord starts by kind of answering that question. But what happens is that the first 6 questions he is answering very briefly. So he says, Brahman is imperishable, the supreme. His essential nature is called Adhyatma, the creative force that causes beings to spring forth into manifestation is called work. So already he has given us 3 things here. And why does he kind of only take one verse to talk about these 3 things? Because he's already talked about them before. And therefore, there is no need to elaborate on that. And Arjuna, although he has asked the question, he has asked the kind of a contextual question in the sense that he wants to understand the relationship between these things. And he is also asking about karma, work. And we'll see how that is also kind of talked about. So Adhibhuta constitutes my perishable nature, and the indweller or the essence is the Adi Devata, and I alone am the Adi Yagda here in this body, or best of the embodied. So he calls him the embodied in this particular context. These represent the various expression of Brahman at levels of both the total, samashti, and individual, vyashti. So remember that, Bhagwan Krishna sometimes take us to the highest way of functioning, of understanding at the cosmic level, and then he also describes the same thing at the individual level. In other words, this philosophy is so wonderful that it can translate itself right at the cosmic level, and it can translate itself into the experience of you and me. The same principle is functioning throughout creation. This is something wonderful to kind of understand in the way in which it is being explained. Now, what we need to understand within the context of what I was describing earlier is that how does this fit into the pathway? So remember, first of all, it is about Saguna Bhakti. This is what this chapter is going to talk about. Upasana. Upasana is the main thing. Now, as I was saying before, Upasana is for those who are not yet capable of having this full knowledge, jnana and vijnana. Then what is the alternative for that? He said that the chapter which this one talks about, in this chapter we will talk about those who are not able to attain this full knowledge, but who are medium seekers. So, in other words, they have purity, but it's not enough for them to move on to the next stage. At the same time, they have some kind of what you call identification with their body, mind, intellect, and therefore that is also there, which is making them to have this sense of duality, and therefore, as a medium seeker, this becomes the pathway. So, in other words, Jivan Mukti is not going to be attained in this life, but there is a provision here which Lord Krishna is giving us. He says, even if you are not pure enough to start with, but if you focus and concentrate, Abhyas Yoga he's going to mention, if you do enough Abhyas and necessary Abhyas, at the moment of death, you will still have the opportunity of getting liberated. See how wonderful Bhagwan has given this knowledge and guidance to us. He has not left any pathway closed. And in this case, if we are a medium seeker, then this is the pathway which we need to follow. And therefore, talking about Brahman, which is the imperishable, and you remember this is Akshar Brahman, which means the supreme imperishable. And Akshar means what? That this is something which is imperishable. Now, if you think about what is perishable then, because we are talking about imperishable, everything in this creation is perishable, including you and me. Anything which is changing slowly, everything in this creation will be perished. And this is the nature of the universe. And remember the 5 lessons I told you, 5 lessons of life. The lesson number 2 is everything is transient. Everything is changing all the time. so that you need to understand it and know that everything is going to change. So don't hang on to anything, because you know this is also going to change. And then if we then look at the other terms, then let's see how this works. So Brahman is the imperishable Brahman. This is the ultimate reality. And we can think of all these terms within this context. Now, if we look at Brahman, it then is expressing itself in creation as this ultimate divine, expressing itself in the manifest creation. Remember Saguna, the attributes of the manifest divine? This is now what is going to happen, is that Adhyatma gives us sentiency. So you and me, we are not talking and listening. I'm talking, you're listening. You're able to listen. You're aware of what is going on. When I'm talking, you're understanding something, or everything, I'm sure. You're also aware of the environment around you. Everything is there. This is called sentiency. Brahman is not very far. This sentiency itself is an expression of Brahman. And this is called Adhyatma. Okay? Brahman is also available to us as Adhideva. What is Adhideva? Control. You can control your senses. You can control your mind. You can control your body. You can control all this thing. And there are devatas which are sitting in each and every one of these functions. There are the devas of the ears and the eyes, the tongue, the senses. Each one has got its own deva. And this enables for the control and the functioning of that particular instrument or sense. So when you are able to control, remember, this is Brahman expressing itself through you. Wonderful. See, Adhiyagna, what is that? It is functioning of everything. This is now, remember, yajna means what? Sacrifice. And sacrifice at the cosmic level we have seen, and sacrifice at the individual level with the incoming breath is offered into the outgoing breath, etc., etc. There's so many yajnas which were described to us in the earlier chapter. And this is called functioning. Functioning is going on. Circulation of the blood is going on. Everything is functioning within myself. My eyes are functioning. What is this? Adhiyajna. Okay. So sentiency, control, function, and then karma. Action, movement. Movement is taking place. Whether it is in thought or word or deed, movement is taking place all the time. And then adhibhuta, matter. This is my gross body. And my mind and my intellect. This is all matter. So imagine all these things which we are experiencing here and now. Sentiency, control, function, movement, experiencing this body, mind, intellect. All this is what? It is expression of Brahman, here and now. In other words, Brahman is not very far. It is here and now. And if we make this connection between Adhyatma, Adhideva, Adhyajna, Karma, Adhibhuta as expression of Brahman, Brahman, the reality is available to us here and now in its saguna form with attributes. Okay, so this is imperishable Nirguna Brahman, this is perishable Saguna Brahman, and this is expression in creation in you and me. Can you see how wonderful Bhagwan's teaching is, that he is giving Arjuna this connection with the divine right here and now. Okay, and what it means is that having understood that the Saguna Brahman is available to me here and now in this creation, and when I look at creation, which he also described to us in the last chapter as to how to recognize in the creation God himself. This is also another way of looking at it, that within myself I can recognize this divinity even in the movement of the hands and the head. I know that if I make that association between all these things and the divine becomes present and available to me here and now. You don't have to wait for anything. It's available to here and now. This is going to be the upasana. Okay? And then Bhagwan spends the rest of the chapter explaining about the time of his death, because this is the main thing which really is important for us to understand in terms of the yoga of Imperishable Brahman, which is available to us here and now as this changing Saguna Brahman, as this creation, as this body, mind, intellect, and therefore the focus turns as to how I can attain the Supreme while connected to the Saguna Brahman. So he says, whoever at the end leaves the body thinking of any being, to that being only he goes. O Kunteya, son of Kunti, because of his constant thought of that being. Now remember this, because this is going to be expressed as Abhyas Yoga. And this Abhyas Yoga is because the constant thought has to be there of God. Otherwise, we are not going to, at the time of leaving the body, we are not going to attain the Supreme. So therefore, at all times, remember me and fight with mind and intellect fixed or absorbed in me. You shall doubtless come to me alone. Now, this is the important lesson for you and me. This summary of this whole chapter is that whatever we remember throughout our life, this is what we are going to remember at the end of our life. And therefore, the principle is that we have to remember God at all times and fight. Not that we're going to start fighting with anybody, but it means that we have to do our duty. Remember me and do your duties. Take up your responsibilities. Make the choices which are appropriate to the stage and station of your life. With the mind and intellect fixed on me or absorbed in me, thinking of God all the time, you shall doubtless come to me. Why? Because when you're doing this throughout your life, what is going to happen at the end of life? You're going to remember him. So then Bhagwan gives further elaboration on this technique. He says, with the mind not moving towards any other thing, made steadfast by the method of habitual meditation, Abhyas Yoga, and constantly meditating on the Supreme Purusha, the resplendent Opatha, he goes to him. Okay. So in other words, not only the divine is the goal, but the divine is the means. This is what we saw in the last chapter as well. That the mind is not moving towards any other thing. Mind is totally in connection with the divine. Whether you think of this just a movement of my hand, looking at it, divine comes to my mind. Looking at my breathing, divine comes to my mind. When my eyes are functioning, divine comes to my mind. This is called habitual meditation, Abhyas Yoga, whereby the mind gets constantly is meditating on the Supreme Purusha through the Saguna form. The resplendent, he says, he goes to him. So what to do? Abhyas Yoga. Which means what? Practicing this kind of meditation with total sincerity, regularity, and consistency with full understanding and determination. 4 Ds. You remember the 4 A's, B, C, Ds? This is the 4 Ds. Determination, devotion, discipline, deep desire. This is called mumukshutva, deep desire to attain the Supreme. And the object of meditation, the Supreme Purusha, in the form which is Saguna form. How to do it? Here's how to do it. Whoever meditates upon the omniscient, the ancient, the ruler of the whole world, minuter than the atom, the supporter of all, of form inconceivable, effulgent like the sun, and beyond the darkness of ignorance. So what are we going to do? We are going to meditate. This is called Nirguna Dhyanam. Okay, but of course it is related to my Saguna Upasana as well. So Nirguna Dhyanam actually comes after Saguna Upasana, but in this case he's saying, take time out and also meditate upon the Nirguna aspect as well. So omniscient, ancient, ruler, these are the pointers which Lord Krishna gives for us to meditate on. So suppose then you close your eyes and say, minuter than the atom, what does it mean? It brings the mind to a state of absorption, a concentration, which allows you to get absorbed in this meditation of the Supreme Brahman. Effulgent like the sun and beyond darkness. And these are really pointers towards that ultimate reality. So we are taking time to do this Nirguna Dhyanam, but at the same time, we are doing Saguna Upasana. And the focus here is mainly on the Saguna Upasana. So he says what to do at the time of the death. He says, at the time of death, with an unshaken mind full of devotion. Number one, by the power of yoga, fixing the whole prana between the eyebrows. Number two. Number three, with this kind of technique, which is done at the time of death, the seeker reaches the supreme resplendent Purusha, attaining Purusha. In other words, attaining realization right at the moment of death. Now, remember, at the time of death, things are not going to be easy. Imagine, you have come across all different types of death. And one thing we can be sure of that, that at the time of death, everything is going to be chaotic. Everything is going to be chaotic in the sense the mind is all over the place. The senses are hardly seeing anything. The devas of these various functions are beginning to take off. And within all that, imagine that you have to have this unshaken mind full of devotion. It's an absolute challenge. So what does that mean? It means Abhyas Yoga. It means even when we are in this kind of condition at the end of our life, with death which is just imminent, and the mind and the body and the senses and everything is all over the place, with this kind of determination which we have practiced throughout our life, it is still possible to get this state whereby the mind is unshaken, it is full of devotion, and with this deep concentration which was mentioned to us in the chapter number 6, taking this breath, prana, between the eyebrows. In other words, with full concentration at the chakra which is just behind the eyebrows. And when that is done, with the full concentration, with full absorption, mind unshaken with full devotion, then there is this Krama Mukti which is available, and liberation is completely available to this person who has managed to do this. So at the time of death, this is what is required, what to do at the time of death. And this can only be possible if we have gone through this Abhyas Yoga. So remember, Abhyas 24/7, 365. And if we do that, there is still a chance that at the end of this life, we can attain liberation. See how wonderful Bhagwan Krishna, his generosity, in the sense that if you have not able to do this, and here's a solution. If you are able to do this, here's a solution. If you are somewhere in between, here's a solution. So there is no excuse. He has given us all the methods. So we can't say, oh, I don't know anything about this knowledge. I don't know anything about this jnana, vijnana. I don't know about this, that, and the other. He just says, focus on Om and meditate on Om. Contemplate on the Om and take that to be my representation. And if you do that 24/7, remembering the categories which he introduced to us right at the very beginning, where Arjuna is asking the question about those 6 things. And he is taking us and giving us the picture that we can be in contact with the divine here and now with this kind of abhyas. Okay? So when we are doing that 24/7, 365, this is what we can do at the end of our life, where we have not yet attained Jivan Mukti. Before the end of the life, there is still a chance that we will be able to gain liberation right at the very end. Okay, so this is what we need to do, going into more detail about what to do. Okay, so here he says, that which is declared imperishable by the Veda knowers, that into which the self-control, desire-freed enter. That desiring which brahmacharya is practiced, that goal and the yogic means I will declare to you in brief. So Lord Krishna is giving us more details. So first of all, this imperishable Brahman, the Akshar Brahman, by the Veda knowers. In other words, it is right at the root, at the heart of this knowledge about the Vedas. And remember, the Vedas are 4 in number. There is the Jnana section. This is where the knowledge section is. And this is all the Upanishads which have come out of these Vedas. That into which the self-control and the desire-freed enter. So two conditions here, self-control, desire-freed. In other words, through control of the senses and the mind and the intellect, we have freed ourselves from the desire and we are able to get absorbed in this imperishable reality. And he says, this is where brahmacharya is practiced. Now, brahmacharya has got 2 ways of understanding. One is about, abstinence, and the other one is a much more general definition, which is self-discipline. With self-discipline, that goal, and by the yogic means, he is going to tell us now. So, what is the yogic technique? Here is the yogic technique in detail now. Having closed all the gates, not your front gate or your door or whatever, or your back door. Closing all the gates means closing all the senses. Now, we know that we can only close the eyes, but it means a yogic way of pratyahar. This is mentioned in the Yoga Sutra. With pratyahar, we are able to control the senses so that we take away our attention from the external things which the senses are giving us and take it inside ourselves and confine the mind in the heart. Now, how can you take the mind in the heart? So first of all, we have to take our attention, which is all over the place. Usually during daytime, 50% of the time, the mind is wandering all over the place. It's called the monkey mind. And the attention is going from one thing to the other, one thing to the other. He says, take all that attention away from everything which is in the outside world and take your attention inward. And when I take my attention inward, this mind, which is nothing but attention, I take it into the heart. Now, heart means what here? My essential nature. What is my essential nature available to me now? Pure awareness. In other words, that I take my mind and place it in pure awareness. And having fixed the life breath in the head, which means this complete focus in the head, like we were mentioning before, that it is kind of focusing the attention in the middle of the eyebrows. And this is engaging ourselves in the practice of concentration. So quite clear instruction as what to do. And if you want more kind of explanation, read Gurudev's commentary on this particular verse and all the other verses, of course. And you'll see that he gives very good guidance in terms of what each of these terms means, okay? Mine is to just introduce you to this knowledge, and then for you it is about reflection and reading and reflection and practicing. So this is the yogic technique. And when the mind is thus prepared, we have to utter the 1 syllable Om, the symbol of Brahman. And he says, remembering me, he who departs leaving the body attains the supreme goal. So mind has been brought to a single pointed attention. It has become still. Om is vibrating through the mind, and my mind is completely fixed on the Lord himself. In this case, it may be with a name and a form. And he says, uttering this Om with the mind fully absorbed in remembering the Lord himself. When we depart in this kind of way, leaving the body, we will attain the Supreme. So this is the technique. And very clear instructions as what to do. 24/7, 365. When we have lived a life like that, at the end of that life, we are now ready to take up this yogic technique, even when everything is chaotic. We can still bring our mind into control, place it in the essence of ourselves, the heart, and we chant Om, remembering the Lord himself. If we depart in this condition, we attain the Supreme. Okay, so this is the yogic technique, and I think it's remembering all these things which Bhagwan is giving us, that he has not left any stone unturned, and he knows the human condition, because after all he is the one who created us. So he knows that this is what needs to be done, and the mind should be absolutely in control. And what happens is that one way I think about this often is that while you are falling asleep, every night, try to practice this. Every night, while you are just about to go into the sleep mode, remember to close all the gates, confine the mind into the heart, fix the breath in the head. Now that only means that you're fixing the gaze in the middle of the eyebrows. And you practice with that concentration, you utter the sound Om in your mind, and just fill your mind with this vibration of Om. And remember God and fall asleep. Practice this every night. And during the day, keep on remembering God with all the pointers he has given us. If you want to sit in meditation, there is a way. If you want to remember God throughout the day, there is a way. If you want to then fall asleep using this yogic technique, then that is also another way. In other words, the daily practice of this is required. Actually, it is required. This is abhyas. This is abhyas yoga. You need to do that. And if you do it, there is still a chance of gaining liberation in this very life. Okay? So, 3 conditions. I'm easily attainable by 3 conditions. The ever steadfast yogi, satatam, constantly remembers me daily. Nityasaha, not thinking of anything else. Ananya bhakti. Remember, not thinking of anything else but the Lord himself. These are the 3 conditions. If we are able to bring ourselves to be in these 3 conditions, he is easily attainable. This is what himself is saying. I'm easily attainable if you have these 3 things in your abhyas. And the goal, having attained me, these Mahatmas, great souls, do not take birth again, which is the house of pain and is non-eternal. In fact, it is called Dukkhalayam, the abode of dukkha, the abode of suffering. They do not take birth because they have got these 3 things, conditions which are met, and then I become easily available. These Mahatmas, great souls, they do not take birth again. They have reached perfection and they attain moksha. So you can see, he has given us the method of concentration, daily what to do, at the moment of death what to do, on a daily basis, how to engage with Nirguna Brahma, Saguna Brahma, and knowing that we want to escape this dukkhalayam. And just to kind of take you in this bigger picture of Dukhalayam, remember that if we don't make any effort, worlds up to Brahmaji are subject to rebirth. Even if we go to Brahmaloka, we still have to come back. But he who reaches me, there is no birth. So we can go gradually up and up and up, right up to Brahmaloka. In Brahmaloka, there is also a great possibility that you can get liberation. But if not, then you have to keep on coming back. All the other lower worlds about the earth, about this world of ourselves, we have to kind of go to that, depending on the kind of punya we have done. And again, we have to return back to taking another birth. But somebody who has attained the Lord himself, there is nothing else to do. There is no rebirth. Those people who know me know the length of the day, Brahma, which ends in 1,000 yugas, aeons, and the night, which also ends in 1,000 yugas. They know day and night. So they know day and night means what? They know how long it takes. Okay, so one yuga we can think of as 4.32 million years, taking all the 4 yugas together: Satyug, Treta Yug, Dwapar Yug, Kali Yug. And then one day of Brahma is 1,000 times that, 4.32 billion years. And then one night of Brahma is 1,000 times 4.3, again 4.32. And then 1 month of Brahma is 259.2 billion years. And imagine the life of the universe, 12 months of Brahma, times 100. This is where you're going to stay if you don't follow the path of spirituality. It is a long time to stay in this Dukhalayam. Imagine that we are imprisoned in this place of suffering. Just to put it in context, that if we don't make the effort here and now, of course, all of us are, have gathered together in this satsang. So already we are not in that state whereby we have to wait, X number of billion years. We are already on the path. So take this human birth to be a precious time for you to do your sadhana and to attain the supreme, even if it means going right up to the end of your life. At the moment of death, it will still be available to us. So don't give up. Keep on doing it. Keep on doing it. Abhyas yoga every day, remember. And from the unmanifest, all the manifest proceed. At the coming of the day and at the coming of the night, they dissolve verily in that alone which is called unmanifest. So unmanifest in this sense is not the ultimate unmanifest, but unmanifest in the sense of I am manifest in my waking time, but I become unmanifest in my deep sleep. So daytime comes, I manifest myself as this ego identity. When I go to sleep, I don't know I exist or the world exists. I become unmanifest. So imagine that even at this Brahmaji scale, at the end of a day, everybody becomes unmanifest. But then they manifest again when the daytime comes. Just like we go to sleep, become unmanifest, and wake up, we become manifest. So also Brahmaji's sleep and waking. This same multiple of beings are born again and again, and they are dissolved into unmanifest helplessly. Helplessly, unless you are willing to do something about it. And they come forth again at the coming of the day. Same beings are born and get dissolved in this cosmic day and night. So there is no choice. There is going back and forth in this Dukhalayam, this life of suffering. But verily there exists higher than the unmanifest, this transactional avyakta, another unmanifest, which is eternal, which is not destroyed by when all beings are destroyed. So the message here is clear. If we don't attain the unmanifest eternal, then we are caught up in this transactional avyakta. In other words, we keep on going back and forth. This is the cycle of rebirth as it is described within the context of the creation and Brahmaji's day and night and Brahmaji's lifetime until the time dissolution takes place, when everything disappears. So it is a very long time, right? So he says that which is called unmanifest and imperishable, that they say is the highest goal. They who reach it will never return again. That is my highest abode. This is the highest state. So what is the goal? We have to reach this unmanifest, imperishable, even if it means Saguna Bhakti throughout the lifetime, and right at the end, we attain that. Or if we are karma sannyasis, we go immediately into the path of knowledge, and through absorption, we can reach it. Remember that earlier diagram I showed you? So, and if we are lucky enough, like Bhagwan Ramana Maharshi, we bypass everything and go into Jnana Nishtha. But there are very few of those people around. So most of us have to go through this pathway, which includes doing a lot of abhyas. But once we reach there, then there is no coming back to any kind of suffering. The highest Purusha or Patha is attainable by unswerving devotion to him alone, within whom all beings dwell, by whom all this is pervaded. Okay, this is the thing which we have to attain, the highest Purusha. And how are we to do that? By unswerving devotion to him alone, Ananya Bhakti. And this is Saguna Bhakti, Saguna Upasana, and this is what we are going to do 24/7, 365, with all the other yogic techniques is already described to us, and that is the way to go. Okay, so now all this will begin to fall into place. This is what I showed you right at the very beginning to give you the context of what we are going to talk about. And again, to remind ourselves, in the state of ajnana, whereby we are in a state of ignorance, again and again we come to this dukkhalayam. We take birth again and again according to our karma. And remember, karma at the cosmic level is all the actions and everything, movement which is taking place at the cosmic level. At the individual level, karma is responsible for giving us this body and this life. And if nothing is done about that karma, more and more karmas are being generated, and we come back again and again into the cycle of birth and death. This is ajnani. But we are all jnanis, so we have kind of reached that stage where knowledge is available to us, some experience is available to us, and we can follow the path of unmanifest Brahman if we are ready, and we are attain that state of purity, whereby through quiescence and through absorption in the knowledge as a jnani, we get liberated. In case we are not yet there, 100% purity is not there, maybe 60, 70%, 50% is there, then what we can do is take up upasana. We become an upasak of the saguna form. And with 24/7, 365, absorbed in that knowledge of the divine and connection with the divine, with all the things which are mentioned to us in this chapter, at the very end of life, with Om vibrating in our cells, in the mind, we still attain liberation. So through upasana, we can still attain liberation if we are able to focus on Om at the point of death. But nothing is lost. So even when we are doing upasana, the Om does not come at the moment of death. We can still get elevated births. We still be practicing karma yoga. And through that, if Om does not arise at the point of death, we still get elevated births, which is what you have now. Think about it. That you have access to this knowledge, you are interested in this knowledge, you are even practicing this knowledge. And even if you do puja, japa, chintanam, even if you do karma yoga, selfless service, you do your duty, you're doing dharma according to the station and stage of your life, you are on the path. And again, like Adi Shankaracharya ji says, don't miss this opportunity. because we don't know whether it's going to arise again or not. At the moment, I'm conscious that I'm human. I'm conscious that I've got this mind and intellect and this body, which can be put into Abhyas Yoga. And I should not lose this opportunity when I have this human birth, when I have a master like Puja Gurudev to guide us, and when we have this humanity within us, a moral code according to which we are living, a dharmic life, then this opportunity should not be wasted at all. Okay. So he has given us all the pathways. There is no way in which we can say, oh, I can't do this or can't do that. If you can't do this, and it is again mentioned later on in one of the chapters, if you can't do this, you can do this. You can't do this, you can do this. So it is all available. And then finally, Bhagwan Shri Krishna kind of makes this available to us in a different way, whereby he talks about the two paths, the dark and the light, and how to attain the supreme. So basically, when we talk about, the path of the Madhyam Adhikari, the medium seeker, and the path of the highest seeker and the path of no seeker, then we can think of these two pathways. So now at what time path departing yogins go never to return, as also to return that time, I will tell you, O chief of the Bharatas. So first one, fire, light, daytime, bright fortnight, the 6 months of the northern solstice. Following this path, men who know Brahman go to Brahman. Secondly, smoke, nighttime, the dark fortnight, also 6 months of the southern solstice, attaining by these to the moon. Okay, so first one was the path of the sun. This is the path of the moon. The lunar light, the yogi, remember not the ajnani, but the yogi returns. So in other words, that he is telling us that if we go along the pathway of light, which is full-time abhyas, and at the end of that journey, at the end of our life, we are able to focus the mind and bring complete absorption in the sound Om, then we know Brahman and we go to Brahman. But on the other hand, if we are not able to do that, then we will attain the higher worlds, which means we have done a lot of sadhana, we have done a lot of punya, but somehow the end comes where we are not able to do this. So remember, the end can come in many different ways. And, we've seen examples of people who have a heart attack, and within minutes, that person is gone. And sometimes it's an accident, not even any warning at all, and the person is gone. But if that person has been doing his sadhana or her sadhana, then there is a good chance that this yogi who has been practicing these things will return, but he will return with a head start, that he'll be able to engage with sadhana even at a young age. So nothing is lost. Okay, so these are the two pathways, the bright one and the dark one. And some people take this literally, but I think there is a kind of symbolism behind all this. And to say that if we follow a certain pathway, we can go to Brahman. If another pathway we follow, whether due to circumstances or whether we are not able to do this full practice, then we can go and return. And we'll attain the higher worlds according to the kind of sadhana we have done, the punya karma we have done. We will go to those places and come back to start again. The whole thing is, remember that the life of Brahmaji is very long indeed. And the day of Brahma is again very long. So we don't want to stay in this Dukhalayam forever and ever. Let's make an effort. Let's do our sadhana. Let's do our abhyas. And one way or the other, we know we are going to get there. Okay? So the path of the light and the path of the darkness available for the world are verily thought to be both eternal. One, the path of light, a man goes to return not. By the other, the path of darkness, he returns. Knowing these paths of path, no yogi should be deluded. Therefore, what to do? At all times be steadfast in yoga, Arjuna. Okay? Whether the fruit of merit is declared in the scriptures as springing from the study of the Vedas, from performing sacrifices, from practice of austerities, beyond all these go the yogin who have known this, the two paths, Nirguna and Saguna, attains to Brahman, the primeval essence. So you can get fruit from the fruit of merit from all these things: performance of sacrifices, performing austerities, doing some of these things which we do in our lives, performing this yajna, sacrifices, doing charity, this, that, and the other, which are very good things because they earn you punya karma. But the yogi goes beyond all these things, who, having known this, having known the path of Nirguna and Saguna, then directly engages with the divine through Saguna Bhakti, Saguna Upasana, or Nirguna Dhyana. He attains to the Supreme. Okay. So this is really an interesting chapter, and he says, having gone through the manifest karma yoga, to the unmanifest divine, gradual or direct, one will attain liberation. So there is no loss in anything. So again, just to remind ourselves, unmanifest Brahman, liberation; manifest Brahman, Upasana, death with Om, gradual liberation, but definitely liberation; death with no Om, elevated births; and finally gradual liberation. This is a Jnani, this is the Upasak, and this is the Karma Yogi. And this is the path of return, path of darkness, and this is the path of sun, light. There is no return. Okay, so there you are. Now to do the homework, again, conscious living, 4 A's, 4 B's, 4 C's, which should be familiar by now. And remember, this is a conscious way of living, and spirituality is nothing but a conscious way of living. And here's the homework for the next month. Understand the different pathways, do your sadhana, fits the criteria of Krama Mukti or gradual liberation, and the method of daily practice, verse number 7, of living through the Gita. Okay, continue to practice all these other techniques from the previous chapters as well. Prepare and execute a daily intensified plan of meditation as well. If you don't have one, just do one now, and then practice that as well. Enjoy the sadhana, stay well, and keep well. Stay safe. Hari Om. Thank you. So I'm going to switch over to Zoom now. Stop sharing. And here we are. So we will conclude with the closing prayers, please. Jayashree.
Yes, Hari Om. Om Sarve Bhavantu Sukhinah, Sarve Santu Niramaya, Sarve Bhadrani Pashyantu, Ma Kaschit Dukha Bhag Bhavet. Om Asato Ma Satgamaya, Tamaso Ma Jyotirgamaya, Mrityorma Amritam Gamaya. Om Purnamada Purnamidam Purnat Purnamudachyate Purnasya Purnamadaya Purnameva Vashishyate. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. Harihi Om Shri Gurubhyo Namaha. Harihi Om. Om na tatra suryo bhati na chandra tarakam nema vidyuto bhanti kuto yamagnihi तमेव भान्तम् अनुभाति सर्वं तस्य भासा सर्वमिदं विभाति बोलिए श्री सद्गुरुनाथ महाराज की जय हरि ओम
Hari Om, everyone, and just to let you know that I have not uploaded the video because some parts have been corrupted, so I'm trying to sort it out. So this video, hopefully this one is recorded properly, and I will upload it within a short while. But the file, the PDF, and the audio recording will be available by the end of this week. So Hari Om, take care, and
Thank you.
see you next
Thank
month.
you.
Thank you Raj
Hari Om.
Thank
Hari Om.
Hari Om.
Hari Om. Thank you.
Hari Om.
Hari Om. Hari Om.
Hello, Uncle, are you there?
Hari Om.
Hi, this is Lata here. Can you hear
Who's
me?
that? Sorry, who's that?
This is Lata here. I've just joined the class today.
Oh, okay. How did you find it?
It was really good.
Right.
I find it interesting, and I like the way how you've dissected the verses and explaining the essence of it and how to practice, and in a very practical way. It's been well, I'm very intrigued, and I would like to continue. Is there any group or that sends you a reminder of when the class is going to be?
Yes, there is a group, and I don't know how you got on to this, but if you get in touch with me,
Use
then I
a class Thursdays, every Thursday, and in one of the members sent this link, and that's how I was able to join. So who should I come to be part of this group?
So